A street boy breaks into a hospital room and shouts, "Turn off the machines now!" Seconds later, the millionaire fell to his knees crying. And the impossible happened. The city seemed to ignore him. People walked past as if he were invisible, just a shadow among honking horns, hurried footsteps, and closed windows. Joshua knew this dance well. Nobody saw, nobody cared, nobody stopped. At 13, he had already learned that survival was a dirty game where the weak turned into statistics. That afternoon, the heat cracked the asphalt as if the world were frying from the inside out. Joshua searched for shade, and the canopy of a tree in a fancy square offered him shelter. Lying on a stone bench, chewing on an expired granola bar, he saw the iron gate for the first time. It was massive, black, with golden arabesques and a camera blinking like an eagle's eye. Beyond it, a flawless garden hid a mansion that looked like it belonged in a modern fairy tale, and there in the middle of the garden was a girl. Sitting on the grass, wearing a light dress and a ribbon in her hair, Emily drew with crayons on loose sheets of paper. But there was something strange about her. Not in her looks. She was pretty. She seemed healthy. But in her eyes that wanted to escape from somewhere. Joshua stepped closer, peering through the bars. She noticed. "Hi," she said without looking up. He glanced around. They were alone. Nervous but curious, he answered, "Hi, do you live around here?" "I live out there." She smiled, understanding what he didn't say. And she didn't ask anymore. In the days that followed, their meetings became routine. Joshua always returned at the same time, and she would be waiting on the other side of the gate. They shared secrets, laughter, and made up stories. He told her about stray cats that turned into spies. She told him about hidden lakes inside the mansion's library. Joshua brought cheap candy he stole from corner stores. Emily smuggled him sandwiches and children's books. It was friendship, pure, raw, silent, real. "You're the only one who doesn't treat me like I'm made of glass," she said once. "And you're the only one who sees me." It was all in secret. Emily swore nobody knew. Her father was strict, busy, always traveling. Her stepmother, Margaret, was worse, cold, obsessed with appearances. The first time Margaret saw them talking from a distance, her glare was sharp enough to cut. The next day, Emily showed up with a scratch on her wrist and claimed she had fallen down the stairs. But Joshua could spot a lie and fear. Still, they carried on. The gate became both symbol and barrier, a boundary they couldn't cross, but one that didn't keep them apart. "One day you'll come in," she said. "One day you'll come out," he replied. But that day never came. In the third week, Emily didn't show up. Joshua thought she might be sick. He came back the next day. Nothing. The following week, the gate was locked with a heavy chain and padlock. He waited. And waited. He ate the stale bread she had given him days earlier. Slept on the sidewalk. Stayed there for hours. On the 6th day, he overheard 2 women in the square. "They say William's daughter is in the hospital, fell into a coma out of nowhere." A coma? But that girl was so full of life? Joshua felt his stomach drop. A coma? She had been laughing just 2 days before, playing, jumping hopscotch on the marble porch. How could she be in a coma? He ran to the public hospital, but she wasn't there. He tried the private one, and the guards laughed in his face. "Get lost, kid!" He didn't give up. He wandered through parking lots, tried climbing walls. He managed to see her name on the admission list from afar. Emily Johnson. Room 307. He tried to get in, blocked, tried again, slapped away. On the 3rd day, he hid in the trash just to see her window, but every curtain was drawn. No sign of her. Something was wrong, very wrong. And the silence made it worse. In the nights that followed, Joshua barely slept. Nightmares of machines and poisons, of Margaret smiling, of the iron gate closing forever. He remembered her last words, "If I disappear, will you find me?" And now, standing outside that filthy, rich, mask-wearing world, Joshua made himself a promise. "I'll find you, Emily, no matter what it takes." The gate was no longer just a barrier. It was a warning. Behind it, someone was lying, and Emily was trapped. Inside the mansion, silence was thick, almost solid. It drifted through the hallways like a ghost. Persian rugs muffled footsteps, curtains blocked out the sun, and Emily's absence seemed to have sucked the very air out of the house. In the office, where William once discussed investments and astronomical profits, there was now only disorder and exhaustion. He slumped in a leather armchair, eyes sunken, shirt collar undone, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the desk. "William," Margaret placed her hand on his shoulder, her touch too soft to be sincere. "She shouldn't be like this. She was so full of life, Margaret," he murmured, voice breaking. "And she'll be fine, my love. Anthony is doing his best," she said, squeezing his hand. "You trust him, don't you?" He nodded slowly. Anthony had been his friend for over 20 years. He was there when Emily was born, when William buried his wife, and at every hard turn of his life. If Anthony said it was a rare disease, incurable, unpredictable, then it was. But what if it's something else? A mistake? A reaction to some medicine? "You need rest, William. You're exhausted. And there are other matters to deal with," Margaret said, seizing the moment. "The company's lawyers need your signature. The board is paralyzed. You have to give me authority to handle things while you focus on Emily." "I'm not thinking about business right now." "Exactly. That's why you should leave it to me. Just sign the authorization. You trust me, don't you?" William hesitated, then signed, without reading. Margaret's lips curved into a faint smile as she left the office with light, almost dancing steps. In the hallway, she pulled out her phone and typed a short message. He signed. It's done. At Saint Vitor Hospital's restricted ward, Anthony adjusted the IV tubes with precision. Dressed in a white coat, his expression professional, his eyes carried a different glint, cold, clinical, too detached for a doctor. Emily lay still, but not dead. Her vitals were stable. On the surface, the treatment seemed to be working, but that wasn't what he wanted. From his inner pocket, he pulled out a small glass vial and swapped the syringe solution. Something transparent, odorless, but devastating in continuous doses. One more step toward eternal silence, he whispered before leaving the room. Outside, Joshua watched. Wearing an oversized hoodie and a cap pulled low, he pretended to sell candy at the hospital's side entrance. It was his third attempt that week to get close. The first time, he was kicked. The second, they threatened to call the police. Now, he simply observed, taking notes of the routines, marking schedules, studying the shifts. He needed to see Emily. He needed to understand what was happening. Most of all, he needed to know who that doctor was, the one who always left her room without speaking to anyone. Then he noticed something. A young nurse, hair hastily tied back, face tired, stopped at the cafeteria door with a tray in her hand. She looked around, then back down at her clipboard. Something was bothering her. Joshua acted fast. He left his candy cart against the wall, slipped into the parking lot. It was dirty, but it would do. Posing as a delivery guy, he entered through the back and made his way to the locker room. Changed clothes. Now he just had to walk quickly and avoid eye contact. Down the hallway of Ward 3B, he crossed paths with the same nurse he'd seen earlier. She was alone. "Hey, miss," he called softly. She jumped. "What is it?" Dr. Anthony, is he always like that? Do you really think he's trying to cure the girl in room 307? "Who are you?" she whispered, glancing around. "Her friend." "Impossible. She's in a coma." "She talked to me. Before all this, She was fine, and now she looks like a doll. The nurse hesitated. Her eyes filled with unresolved doubts. I thought it was strange, too. The reports don't match. He writes one thing and administers another. I've thought about reporting it, but if I say anything, I'll be fired. Do you have proof? Nothing concrete, just a feeling, and fear, a lot of it. Joshua met her eyes firmly. It wasn't the look of a child. It was the look of someone who lived on the streets and knew what it meant to lose everything. If you can't, I can, but I need to get into that room, see her, find out what they're doing to her. That's insane. Insane is letting her die when you know you could do something. Then, after glancing both ways, she said, Wednesday, night shift. The guard falls asleep after 2 a.m. The spare key to the room is behind the emergency box in room 3C. What's your name? Rachel. Thank you, Rachel. You'll see. I'll uncover everything. She didn't answer, just turned and hurried away, as if trying to erase what she'd just done. Joshua stood frozen in the middle of the white corridor, wearing a dirty lab coat, and there was no turning back. The city slept, but Joshua's heart beat like a war drum. He wore the stolen lab coat, taken 2 days earlier from an unlocked locker. Surgical gloves on his hands, mask over his face, and a fake badge clipped to his chest. Intern. Night ICU. The night was his ally. Silent, slow, complicit. He slipped through the shadows of the hospital's side parking lot, entered through the service door. He remembered Rachel's instructions. The spare key to room 307 is behind the emergency box. He found it, took it, breathed deep. Now everything depended on courage. The door to room 307 clicked open. Inside, the air was cold, filled with the metallic scent of machines. And then he saw her. Emily, lying motionless. Her hair neatly tied back, her face pale. A tube ran from her mouth, 2 others into her arms. Wires clung to her chest. And machines. Short beeps shattered the silence, but that wasn't what broke Joshua. It was the tear sliding from the corner of her eye. Emily, he whispered, stepping closer. He touched her hand. It was cold, but then he felt the faintest squeeze, weak but real. She was conscious, trapped inside her own body. Joshua swallowed the knot in his throat. He couldn't cry. Not now. He looked at the machines. He didn't understand the numbers, but everything screamed. She didn't look sick. She looked restrained. Footsteps. He froze. The doorknob turned. He darted into the linen closet, pulling the door shut from the inside, leaving only a sliver to watch. 2 figures entered. One was Anthony. The other, Margaret. Are you sure she still feels anything? Margaret asked, her voice dripping with disgust. Maybe. The body is tricky, Anthony replied, adjusting a monitor screen. But the brain's sinking. Slow. William almost signed the wrong papers today. He's starting to suspect. He'll stop suspecting once she dies. Grief blinds the wealthy. And if she wakes up? She won't. The dosage is low but steady, enough to keep her like this. Nice and quiet. Sleeping with her eyes open. Margaret stepped closer to the bed, straightening the blanket with fake tenderness. Will it be quicker now? If I increase the compound just a little. 3, do you want it to look natural or speed it up? All I want is that will changed and William under control. After that, she can go. Joshua wanted to scream, smash the glass, throw himself at them. But he knew it would mean the end. Anthony pulled the vial from his pocket. The same vial Joshua had seen before, not knowing what it was. Now he did. Poison. Tomorrow morning I'll switch the medication. It'll look like a sudden decline. Perfect, Margaret said, smiling. After that, all that's left is to console the poor widower and handle the inheritance. They laughed, left the room, the door shut behind them. It took Joshua several seconds to crawl out of the closet. His legs shook, his palms sweated, his stomach churned. But when he looked at Emily again, he saw another tear. This time, a pair. She knew everything, heard it, understood it, and couldn't do a thing. Joshua knelt. "I swear, not today, but soon. I promise." He kissed her hand and stood. The escape was even riskier. A nurse suddenly appeared in the hallway. Joshua threw himself behind a medicine cart, waited for the man to pass, then bolted toward the basement. He slipped past the laundry ward, shoved the lab coat into a hamper, and slipped out the back, vaulting over the side gate. When the night air hit his face, he ran to. He had seen the truth with his own eyes, heard it with his own ears, and now he couldn't pretend he didn't know. Emily was being poisoned. Joshua walked down the street with hunched shoulders and a heavy heart, as if carrying a secret far too big for someone his size. Because that's what he was, a street kid holding the truth in his hands, and no one willing to listen. That morning, he returned to the hospital. Rachel wasn't on duty. He waited a full hour until he spotted a doctor who seemed less cold than the others. He was young, with a badge that read, General. Joshua followed him to the parking lot. "Doctor? Hey, doctor!" The man turned, confused. "What is it?" "It's about the girl in room 307. Emily, she's being poisoned." "Who are you?" "A friend. I saw it. I heard it. Her doctor, Anthony. He's giving her poison. And there's a woman with him, her stepmother." The man frowned. "That's a very serious accusation." "I know, but it's true. I went in there last night. She squeezed my hand. She's alive, conscious." "I heard it all." The doctor stepped back. "You broke into the hospital?" "I had to. No one was listening to me, and now she's going to die if nobody does anything." "Look, kid, maybe you imagined it or misunderstood. Coma is a complicated state," the doctor said, already starting to walk away. "I'm not lying. She's alive. They want to kill her. Sorry, but you need to leave before I call security." And that was it. Another door slammed. He had to talk to William. It was his only chance. He climbed the back wall, slipped through the garden, and knocked on the kitchen door. A maid recognized him. "You're the boy who used to talk with Miss Emily. Please, let me talk to her father. It's urgent. She's in danger." But before the woman could respond, two guards. "Back here again, kid? Let go! I need to talk to William. She's dying. They're going to kill her." "What's this story?" asked the other, already calling the gatehouse. "It's Margaret, and the doctor, too. They're fooling everyone." He was thrown to the ground, cuffed, and taken to the police station. There, sitting in a plastic chair, he tried to explain it all again. "What's the girl's last name?" the officer asked, impatient. "Johnson. And what are you to her? We used to meet at her gate." "Do you have proof of this?" "I saw her at the hospital. She squeezed my hand. They talked about poison. Please, she's going to die." The officer sighed. "Got a record, kid? Nothing serious. Petty theft. Food. Here's some advice. Making up stories about rich people will only make things worse for you." They kept him there for 3 hours before releasing him without charges. Just another street kid. No credibility. No voice. His eyes were hard, his chest locked tight. No one was going to help. The only way to save Emily was with his own hands. He wandered aimlessly until he stopped in front of an abandoned building. An unfinished structure filled with rubble, ropes, and forgotten tools. He slipped inside unnoticed, spent hours searching, found a flashlight, pliers, a climbing rope, an old backpack to carry everything, black shoes that almost fit. He took it all. He mapped the route, night shift, emergency room 3C, spare key. He sketched everything on a dirty notebook page with the stub of a broken pencil. Then he returned to the hospital, not to go in, just to watch. And there, sitting on a bench in the staff courtyard, was Rachel. He approached carefully. "I tried. I told a doctor, Nobody believes me. Not the police, not her dad. Nobody hears me, Rachel. She looked at him as if seeing him for he was someone carrying the entire world on his back. They're speeding up the plan. Anthony increased the medication yesterday, she said. She doesn't have much time. I'm getting her out. Tonight. How? I'll go through the side window of Ward 3B. There's an awning below. I can use the rope. I'll break the glass. Take out the tubes. She'll wake up. I know she will. That's suicide. And letting her die isn't? Rachel closed her eyes. If you make it to her room, I'll disable the hallway alarm, but only for 5 minutes. After that, nobody will cover for you. That's all I need. She pulled something from her pocket, an ID wristband. It held the emergency access code. Use this so you don't look like an intruder. It's not much, but it might buy you a few more seconds. Joshua took it with trembling hands. Thank you, Rachel. Don't thank me yet. Sitting on a ledge, backpack at his side, eyes fixed on the cloudy sky, he thought of only one thing. Either she lives, or I die trying. It was now or never. Joshua climbed the side of the hospital as if he were scaling toward his own fate. His dirty hands gripped the bricks and bars of the old 3B wing. The backpack dragged on his shoulders, heavy with rope, flashlight, pliers. The plan. The awning on the second floor gave him support. Slippery, dangerous, but just enough. One room, one chance. The night was thick, no wind, no moon. The only light came from the glowing windows of occupied rooms. Rachel had disabled the corridor alarm for 5 minutes, no more. After that, it was him against everything. Joshua reached the ledge of room 307's window, pulled the spare key from his backpack, turned it. Nothing. Locked from the inside. This was it. The moment. He pulled out the pliers, aimed at the explosion of sound cut through the hospital like a gunshot. Shards flew. The crash triggered thermal sensors. Corridor lights blazed on. The clock had started. But he was already inside. Emily was still there. Same position, same pale face. But Joshua knew. She was alive. Ready to come back. She just needed help. Easy, Emily. It's me. With trembling hands, he began shutting the machines down one by one. The beeping monitor turned into her chest began to rise and fall, slowly, naturally. Air from the shattered window rushed in, the first breeze she had felt in weeks. Breathe, Emily, you can do it. I'm right here. He held her hand. It was warmer now, firmer. Then she coughed. Weak, but real. Her body jolted as if hit by an invisible shock. Fingers twitched, eyelids flickered. Yes, come on, Emily, fight! Across the hospital, Margaret woke to the guard's call. She threw on her robe and ran. Anthony was already in the hallway, fumbling with the emergency syringe case. He's back, he hissed, sweating. The damn kid came back. He can't take her from us. Not now. If she wakes up, it's all over. Then do something! The sound of footsteps thundered closer. Doors slammed, radios crackled. Joshua heard it all. He scooped Emily into his arms. She was weak, but alive. Reacting. Her eyes, "You're getting out of here, I promised." The door burst open. Margaret stormed in first, Anthony on her heels. Guards followed seconds later. "Down! Now!" one of them shouted. Joshua stood in front of the bed like a shield. "They're poisoning her! They want Emily dead! He pulled her off the machines! She'll die!" "Lies! I heard you! You confessed! You and her! You're using poison to keep her in a coma!" "He broke in, smashed the window, ripped out vital equipment," Anthony shouted, desperation cracking his voice. Margaret collapsed to the floor in fake tears. "This boy is a criminal! He's trying to kill my stepdaughter! Arrest him!" The guards surrounded Joshua. "Look at her! She's breathing! On her own! Without the machines! She's waking up!" William stumbled into the room, dragged by another guard. "What's happening here?" Anthony tried to hold control. This boy broke into the hospital and removed your daughter from life support. She's in danger." But William didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on Emily. She was moving, for the first time in weeks. He rushed to her side, saw her cough again, turn her head slightly. Slow, but alive. "Dad," she whispered. The sound was faint, almost non-existent, but real. Margaret's face went pale. Anthony staggered back 2 steps, and William understood. "What did you do to my daughter?" The silence that fell was brutal. Joshua was wrestled to the ground, pinned hard. But he didn't care. She had woken. She was there, seeing, speaking, fighting, and now nothing would ever be the same. Room 307, once silent as guards surrounded Joshua, still on his knees, breathless. William moved closer to his daughter, tears in his eyes. Margaret leaned against the wall, trembling, not from fear, but from calculation. She searched for an exit. Anthony sweated cold, clutching his clipboard, struggling to keep the mask intact. "Emily," William repeated, voice breaking. "Did you hear me?" Emily blinked slowly.
Everything. Dad, I heard everything."
Margaret stepped forward, desperation rehearsed in her tone. "She's confused, disoriented. It's normal at this stage. Delirium." "Shut up." William's words cut like a blade. Cold, final, a sentence. "Let her speak." Emily drew a shaky breath, fixing her eyes on her father. "I was awake. I heard it all. Anthony talking about dosages, poison. Margaret saying it would be better without me." Anthony tried to react. "This is nonsense. Post-coma delirium. Very common in patients who... "Watch your words," William roared, voice breaking with both fury and terror. At that moment, Rachel entered the room. "Mr. William," the nurse said, holding a folder. "I know this isn't my place, but there's something you need to see." She handed him documents, altered medication reports, duplicate files, hidden vials. These substances should never be in an ICU room, and they're under another patient's name. One who died 2 months ago. Dr. Anthony was using the system to cover his tracks. William took the main vial with trembling hands. It was the same one he had seen so many times in his old friend's pocket. Anthony tried to slip out, but 2 guards restrained him. "I didn't do anything. This is all a setup by that street kid. He hates me. He made it all up." "I didn't make anything up. I just told the truth. The truth you all tried to kill." Margaret collapsed to the floor again, another performance without an audience. "This is a circus. That nurse is an accomplice. This child broke into the hospital. This is illegal. That girl is delirious." But Rachel was ready. "There's one more thing." She pulled out her phone, connected a headset to the recorder. "I recorded last night's..." The recording was crystal clear. "If I increase the compound just a little, 3 days, tops. Do you want it to look natural or speed it up? All I want is that will changed and William under control." The silence that followed was crushing. Defeated, Anthony collapsed into a chair. He knew there was no way out. I just wanted to help her. Help her father. My practice was going under. You'll answer for this in court." All that was left was pain. Margaret tried one last, desperate breath of control. "William, you can't believe this show. I loved you. I only wanted to protect your inheritance." But he looked at her as if she were a stranger. "I've been sleeping next to a snake this whole time." "William, please." "Get her out of my house, out of my life." 2 guards moved in. Margaret screamed, kicked. Anthony was cuffed minutes later, escorted directly from the ICU. Rachel gave her statement. Joshua, too. The doctors who had stayed silent out of fear now spoke. The pieces fell into place. The truth rose. Hours later, in the now clean room, only Emily, Joshua, and William remained. Emily, Her eyes open, smiled for the first time in ages. "I knew you'd come back," she said weakly. William, standing at her bedside, looked at them both with an indescribable expression, a mix of guilt, relief, and gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you. I failed as a father." "You didn't fail, Dad," Emily said. "You just trusted the wrong people. Now you know who the right ones are." Joshua hesitated. He was ready to leave. He felt he didn't belong anymore. But William gripped his arm. "You're not going anywhere, Joshua." "But the only thing you're going to do now is stay." In the hospital hallway, reporters were already waiting. The case had leaked. Headlines spoke of medical scandal, attempted homicide, a millionaire inheritance. Anthony and Margaret were cursed names now, but inside room 307, only the essential remained: justice, love, truth. Emily slept peacefully. Joshua watched her, seated like an invisible guardian. And William, for the first time, the morning breeze was gentle, and for the first time in a long time, the iron gate stood open. Inside the mansion, the hallways felt different, still wide, luxurious, quiet, but no longer with the silence of fear, lies, or sickness. It was peace. Upstairs, Emily sat in an armchair with a blanket over her shoulders and a book in her lap. Her hair, once bound tight under Margaret's control, now fell loose and natural. Joshua entered quietly, holding a glass of smoothie. With new sneakers, a clean shirt, and a halfway decent haircut, he looked like a different boy. But his eyes still held the spark of someone who had learned to survive on his own. "Brought reinforcements for breakfast," he said, offering the glass. "Trying to make me fat?" Emily teased, smiling. "Trying to make you strong, so you can run with me later." She laughed. It was music. He had done this for days, not out of suspicion, but wonder and guilt. That afternoon, he called Emily to the garden. "Daughter, I need to ask your forgiveness." She simply looked at him. "I was by your side the whole time, and still, I was blind. I let that woman get close to you, to us. I trusted Anthony more than myself." Emily interrupted gently. "Dad, you were poisoned too, in a different way. They knew how to make you vulnerable, but you—" She took his hand. For the first time in months, father and daughter understood each other in silence. The next day, the judge authorized the adoption process. It moved faster than anyone expected. Joshua's record had no serious offenses, and the social report provided by Rachel and the hospital helped. He wasn't just a street kid. He was the boy who saved Emily. When William got the call, he raced upstairs into the— "So, is it crooked?" Joshua asked. "It's perfect," William said, stepping closer. "But you know what's going to be even more perfect." Joshua looked at him, puzzled. "Your full name. From now on, you're Joshua Johnson. Legally, officially. My son." The boy fell silent. He didn't know what to say. He just lowered his head, hiding the tears. "I've never had a room just for me. Never had a full name," he murmured. "Now you have both. And a sister." And Joshua hugged William tightly. Not the hug of a lost child, but of someone who, after everything, had finally been found. With time, the house changed. The library was used again. The kitchen became a gathering place. The garden echoed with laughter and abandoned flip-flops. The expensive rugs remained, but now bore crumbs, crayons, and bare feet. Emily walked with strength again, laughed out loud, lived again. And Joshua discovered what routine meant. Books at the bedside, a key to the door, an entire life that had once only existed outside the gate. Months later, on an ordinary Sunday, the three went out together. They stopped at the square where it had all begun. The iron gate still stood imposing, now without a lock. "Remember this?" Emily asked, touching the bars fondly. "I used to wait right here for you to show up," Joshua replied. and I watched from the balcony, hoping no one would chase. Emily looked at her father and smiled. Now there's no gate anymore. Joshua pulled 2 crayons from his backpack. Still got a few of these saved. Want to draw? She laughed. I do. They sat on the ground just like before. William stood nearby, watching them scratch crooked, colorful shapes across the concrete. Hearts, stars, little houses, a badly drawn dog that looked more like a pig. It wasn't art, it was freedom. Far away, Margaret awaited trial in prison, without makeup, without applause. Anthony faced heavy charges, his career in ruins. Their world collapsed. But no one here felt hatred. The cycle was already closed. Justice was not revenge. It was the end of the line for those who tried to destroy what they could never understand: love. On the iron gate, the drawings were still fresh. Joshua lay back on the grass, staring at the sky. You know, if someone told this, Emily beside him smiled. Good thing we don't need them to believe it. We lived it. William, seated on a bench in the square, simply watched. For the first time in a long while, he felt he was in the right place, with the right people. There, under the same sky where it all began, a new family was born. No poisons, no lies, only truth and love. In the end, this isn't just Joshua and Emily's story. It's about believing. Tell me in the comments, what would be your own iron gate? The one thing you dream of crossing someday. If this story touched you, support this message with a like and subscribe to the channel. It's the most meaningful way to show